What you just
I've made a huge mistake.
That doesn't make sense.
Whoop-de-doo! What does it all mean, Basil?
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Mic check 212, bitch. Mic check 212, bitch.
What is up, guys? This is DDP. I have already broken the fourth wall with my arm. Damn it. Damn it. Alright, what's up, guys? We'll just have to roll with the show anyway. Thank you for tuning in. First in the house, I see we got Gle, got Devo for show. What's up? Jamarcus Williams, what's good, guys? As you can see, I am rolling solo today, and if you can see the text behind me, that is because Enyi is on vacation in Dubai. No official confirmation yet whether or not he's sleeping on the grass. I like to think that he is, so I'm going to report that he is. Yes, Enyi, if you're watching this, I got you, buddy. I know you're sleeping on the grass somewhere in Dubai. But all the same, what up, Barry? But all the same, we're going to do a quick Mavs show here. We're going to talk a little bit about the Mavericks, and I posted on the community page earlier today trying to get your guys' thoughts on kind of what you wanted to talk about, some of the topics you had in mind. This is an open give and take kind of discussion here. We're obviously in the somewhat slow period now for real news on the subject, but the updates I can give that I haven't really talked about previously on the show, we know that Josh Reeves did get the other two-way contract, so Antonius Cleveland got one and Reeves got the other. Well-deserved, well-deserved, I would say. Beyond that, we also know that the Mavericks will have, I think Porzingis, this was reported by Shams, according to sources, Porzingis and the Mavericks will play in New York, I think November 14th, if I recall. I looked it up right before the show. I believe that's what I remember reading. So we got that going for us, which is pretty nice. But that'll also mean the Dennis Smith Jr. potential revenge game. If there's one game this year, I think Dennis Smith might go off. It'll probably be against us. He expressed as much in a recent, it wasn't an interview. I guess it was a podcast he appeared on recently. And he had a lot of interesting things to talk about in that. He talked, for one, about how he's still friends with a lot of guys on the Mavericks, but he still wants his revenge game against us. He also specifically mentioned the fact that he still hears every week from Luka Doncic, so that's really cool. Even though on the court they didn't necessarily pair well together, I think they maybe could have figured it out. But again, if you can pull off the Porzingis deal, you're going to pull off the Porzingis deal every time because his fit with Luka is perfect. From what we've seen of their play styles, they will pair perfectly together. That was never going to be the case with Luka and Dennis Smith. So even though that wasn't a perfect pairing on the court, it's still cool to hear that Luka still is friends, with Dennis Smith off the court, that they're still friends, that they still talk regularly. So I like that. That's a nice little story there for the two pillars of the franchise we thought this time last year that didn't quite get to work out like we had planned. So we'll see now what happens with KP when Dallas goes to New York in November. Michael Thomas, what's up? Goodbye, Costas. Yes, R.I.P. Costas. R.I.P. to Daryl Macon, Shakin' Bacon. All of that as well. All that is true. Jason Bryant, yep, 2-0 to start the year. All right. Michael Thomas, I like Brunson. Brunson's a very nice player. I like Brunson a lot as well. I don't like him as my everyday starter right now. I have some question about his potential ceiling, but at the same time, I think he is a very quality player that at the very least he'll be a very good role player for you for the next several years. So I'm happy with that. And I think Brunson will not be your starter day one. Your opening night starter at point guard is going to be DeLon Wright. Cuban has pretty much already told us as much in an interview he did with Sirius XM Radio talking NBA. I talked about that previously as well. He talked about the big lineup in that case. DeLon Wright is 6'5", and he's going to be the shortest guy in that starting lineup. So Dallas is going to be going for size with their starting lineup most nights. DKD. But how they didn't pair up. You talking about Dennis and Luka? Dennis needs the ball in his hands. He's always been a ball-dominant player. He made strides playing off the ball a little bit, but he's just not a good enough outside shooter, not good enough moving without the ball to really have worked in the long term with Luka for that. But I think they could have improved. I think they still could have been a decent pairing, but Dennis Smith's people had already kind of made it known. He left the team with a phony back injury. He stepped aside from the team for, a few days there, maybe a few games even. And he only came back when it was time to recoup his value so that the Mavericks could move him in a trade and get something they liked. That was the only way Dallas was going to do that for him at that point. So he came back, dropped a triple-double on New York, and the rest is history. So I think that they could have gotten better in that regard, but I think you want for your starting lineup Luka to be your primary ball handler, and Dennis Smith Jr.'s stock tanked after the first couple weeks of the season because you saw as things became more Luka-centric, Dennis Smith kind of became the background player where he could be a nice role player for you, but he's trying to stand out and trying to be a big guy, a big value property in his own right, and it just wasn't quite working out in that regard. Their games didn't complement each other well enough, even though Dennis Smith did make strides as an off-ball player. And a defender, I should mention, too. He made some tenacious growth on that front. Let's see here. Rafa Sina, what's up? I can't see you, Rafa. Where are you? Should we get a lottery pick this year since we actually own our pick? Should we get a lottery pick? I mean, should we? No. They should try and go for the playoffs. By no means. Now that you have Luka and KP, it's not like last year. Last year we were kind of the mind where it was like, hey, especially after Dennis Smith was clear he wasn't going to work out, it was kind of like, well, we're probably not in the playoff race at this point. Maybe we should try and hang on to that pick. Now, yeah, we have our rights to this year's first-round pick, but at the same time, you got Luka and KP. I don't think you want to have a fourth straight year without making the playoffs, and I think that they will be in the running. I mean, they won 33 games last year, and before they traded 4 of their 5 starters, they were still hanging around the kind of edge perimeter of that chase. I mean, what was the number of games that made it to the playoffs last year? Let me look up what the 8 seed record was last year. 1 second while I Guggenheim it. Let's see. Last year, I'm trying to see not what the standings were. I'm trying to see the specific records for the West. So your 8 seed last year as the Clippers. So the Clippers still won 48 games. So yeah, that's a substantial margin when you're talking about having to win 15 more games, but at the same time, I do think that it is doable in that case. I don't think 15 is going to be the number this year. I think it's going to be a little bit, like not 15 in terms of the number difference between you and the 8 seed, I'm saying. I think the Mavericks will be in contention for that 8 seed. If things break well and they're able to make another significant addition at the trade deadline, which they have a history of doing, then I think that there's a chance you could be looking at pushing potentially in a health permitting and if luck breaks your way, maybe even pushing at that 7 seed, but it's going to be really tough this year. That said, I'm not looking to keep a lottery pick this year, because even if you are keeping a lottery pick, again, you won 33 games last year, and you still wound up, if you had kept your pick, had it not been for the Atlanta deal, you're still looking at, the 10th pick? Here's a fun fact for you, and I talked about this at the time of the lottery drawing. In the Mavericks' history, I think they've had 15 years where they've qualified for the lottery. And in those years, 9 times they have performed worse than their odds. Meaning, if they had, look at the year we got Luka. We had the 3rd best odds at the number 1 pick, but we wound up with the 5th pick. We underperformed our odds. If you then look at those other 6 years, we performed where we should have performed. Not once have we ever outperformed what the ping pong balls say we should have gotten. And for that reason, I'm not in favor of that, because to keep a real shot at a pick like that, and with our history, I mean, you're talking about having to win like 29 or fewer games. And I'm not interested in that at all. It's been 3 years since we've been in the playoffs. We have Luka and KP. If we want to ever turn around our track record with drawing big name free agents, it has to start with a playoff run. It does. The Mavericks need to win minimum 42 games. If they're not at least 500, I think they're still going to be hard pressed to draw people in that regard. And I think the Mavericks are mostly banking on growth from within, growth and development from within. That's why they kept Dwight Powell. That's why they kept Maxi Kleber. That's why they kept Dodo. That's why they kept, JJ Barea is not growth. I think he's more of just a veteran leader, and they got a lot of love and respect for him for what he contributed to the championship team. But all the same, and to be fair, he was having the best year of his career prior to his injury. So you gotta look at all of that as well. I think the Mavericks are trying to grow and develop from within. DeLon Wright, yeah, he's been around for a little while. He's 27. He's the same age as Harrison Barnes, but he's never really been given that consistent chance to do something, and I think the Mavericks are looking to do that for him. And they're banking on guys like Brunson, of course, as well, as I talk about growth and development. I feel like I'm talking 100 miles an hour right here, and let me hit up some of the comments here. I'm just a full head of steam, man. Let's see. Lots of good activity in here. Gregor, what's up? Starting five, you're going to be looking at DeLon Wright. You're probably then going to be looking at, in no such order, you'll have Luka in there. You're going to have either Dodo or Justin Jackson. That one's a really interesting debate. Frankly, I'm more interested in Justin Jackson as my potential starter, although Dodo has, he's had his moments here and there, his little flashes, but it's never had the consistency. Then you're going to have KP, and then you're going to have Dwight Powell. In Rick Carlisle's system, you need a rim running center. So that's going to be Dwight Powell at the 5, even though KP, the 7'3" unicorn, is your power forward. I think that's what you're probably looking at in that regard. Let's see. A lot of boos will happen when KP goes to New York for sure. Oh, yeah, exactly. And rightfully so. From their perspective, they look at it as he quit on them. That's why he got traded, because he said he didn't like what they were doing, didn't want to be around, was pretty much demanding a trade. So it is what it is. But at the same time, based on what we know of that disaster, yeah, I think he was in the right for doing it. Here's the thing, too, when people talk about like Luka and KP potentially leaving us. Well, KP's locked up, assuming that he doesn't demand a trade. We know how fluid the landscape is in the NBA these days compared to any other league. But in the NBA, you never have a guy coming off his rookie contract with his first chance to make bank ever leave his team. Ever. KP would have been probably the first guy to do it based on what we know now. KP was set, as we saw, to make $150 million plus. I think 158 or 153 was the number over the course of 5 years. That was the money he was set to make coming off his rookie deal. He was miserable in New York. No continuity with the coaching staff. He'd had like 3 coaches in 4 years, 2 presidents at the time as well. And basic things like that, like him wanting to go to the gym and shoot around on an evening or something like that between games, and they're just like, oh yeah, we don't have anyone there to let you in. Like, what? You're a professional franchise. How are you not prepared for this? How do you not have someone to open the door for me? Stupid stuff like that. I think he would have been probably the first one to ever do that. I say all of this to say Luka's not leaving. Like, historically, Luka is not leaving after his rookie deal. I mean, it would literally be the first time it's ever happened. KP was the first time that was ever even a remote possibility, but he was traded, dealt to Dallas, and yeah, he signed up with his new 5-year max. So I think that's what you're probably looking at for Dallas as well. You probably are going to get at least one max contract out of Luka and see where you stand then. Now, whether you can live out the full term of his deal or KP's deal, obviously you got to build and you got to work on it. But I feel very good about the possibility of them playing together minimum 5 years. Does that mean Dennis Smith Jr. could come back in the future? Dennis Smith Jr. has expressed interest, like relative interest in coming back to Dallas one day, but in the same tweet that he likes the notion of coming back, it's also talking about after Rick Carlisle's gone, and Rick Carlisle is probably one of the 3 longest tenured coaches in the NBA at this point. I mean, obviously Popovich is number 1. I think Carlisle might be number 2 or 3 at that point. So, and I can't even off the top of my head think about who else has been at their place longer than him. He's been there longer than Spoelstra's been in Miami. Doc Rivers, obviously, with the Clippers. Yeah, I think Carlisle is your 2nd longest tenured coach at this point, off the top of my head. Let me know in the comments if I'm misremembering that. But I don't see Carlisle going anywhere because Carlisle has squeezed pretty quality play out of not so good Maverick teams in the last few years, including a playoff run in 16, just getting there. And, you know, the Thunder, they played the Thunder that year. That was the year the Thunder went up 3-1 on the Warriors in the West Finals and should have won. The Thunder knocked off like a 67-win Spurs team that year and then went up 3-1 on a 73-win Warriors team. So it is what it is. Carlisle knows how to get quality out of it. And now that you've finally given him, you know, a year or two Luka plus Porzingis, if Porzingis is healthy, which, again, all indications are yes, and that he could have even played at the end of last year if we wanted him to, or if he wanted to in that case. That tells me that you're going to get something pretty special in this. So Dennis Smith Jr. returning, I don't see it very likely. Do you think Doncic will play the majority of the season in the backcourt or the front court? I think it's pretty fluid. I mean, when Luka started the year last year, we had him started out as our power forward because NBA basketball is kind of fluid. It's positionless at this point. I think more than likely he'll play more in the backcourt this year. Part of what kind of screwed him over in the All-Star voting last year was that he was listed as a front court player, and that put him in contention with guys like Kevin Durant and LeBron and guys like that. I think he'll have a little bit easier waters to navigate in the backcourt. And again, I think he's going to be your starting shooting guard this year. I think that's how he's going to be listed, but he'll be the one initiating the offense. True, but defensively, he helped on the perimeter. Talking about Dennis Smith. Yeah. Dennis Smith made good strides defensively last year before getting traded. I don't know if he kept it up in New York, but he was doing well for us in that regard. And he had grit. He got his tooth knocked out against Pat Beverly in that Clippers game and kept playing. Finished the game missing like his front tooth. Let's see here. I still think about Dennis Smith Jr. going to be an all-star and how him and Luka would have worked together. I don't know if... I mean, I had high hopes for Dennis Smith Jr. I think he has the chance. And now that New York swung and missed so badly in free agency, I think maybe he'll get the opportunity, that he'll be forced to be given the opportunity to grow and develop. And that could open up some doors for him. Because if they had gotten big-name free agents, I think he would have been jettisoned again, and you would see him kind of like a Trey Burke, a highly thought-of prospect coming out who never really is allowed to stay anywhere for too long and therefore never puts down roots, never really develops and grows into the player that you want him to be, or that he could have been. Over/under winning 90 or 93 wins. I misread that. I went dyslexic for a moment. Let's see, 39 wins, over/under. I'm going to say over. Again, I think if you don't get 42, you're hard-pressed. And I think they won 33 last year. And if you remember, they won, I want to say it was like 6 of their final 11. I know that's not like a great percentage, but the point is, after the trade deadline, it was Luka and the reserves. It was Luka and a bunch of spare parts, and Luka was having to play like 40 minutes a night and play great just for Dallas to have a chance at winning some of those games. And so I think I look at that and I say, okay, Luka and Porzingis plus Seth Curry plus the continuity we have in place, is this team better than last year's team opening night? Yes. Here's why I talk about that. No, they don't have the single presence rebounder like DeAndre Jordan, but DeAndre Jordan, he could defend a little bit, but he wasn't super motivated. He was very hit or miss on his level of effort, a lot of times miss. He headhunted for rebounds because that's his thing. And unless he was playing the Clippers, he didn't really ball out. He had one game where he nearly had a triple-double, and that was cool. But for the most part, that just wasn't DeAndre Jordan's game. Harrison Barnes, he's a black hole. He doesn't... I think his career high for assists in a game is like 3. I mean, not a guy who gets his teammates involved. He's very one-dimensional, and he's serviceable but not standout quality in that regard. Wesley Matthews, 3-and-D with subpar. At times he thought he was the real engine of the offense, which was kind of laughable. So yeah, I look at all of that and I say, okay, obviously year 2 Luka is going to be better than year 1. You look at all that and then you say, okay, that team last year, they were, I think, 29th in three-point shooting as a team in terms of the percentage. And yet, in terms of open opportunities, they were like 4th or 5th, I want to say. So they got opportunities all day with Luka running things, but they couldn't knock them down to save their life. Well, they just added a career 42% three-point shooter in Curry. And now you got KP, who was shooting 40% basically before he went down the last season he played. You just see these things and these weapons they've added, and it really stacks up in a promising way. I think this team, it's better than last year's team, for sure. That team won 33 games, and really they torpedoed themselves with those trades. If those trades didn't happen, I still think that team, same roster brought back this year, if that had worked out, obviously it didn't, and I didn't want it to. And of course, DeAndre Jordan was a 1-year deal at the time anyway. But I still think that team probably would have won something like 39, 40 games this year. And I look at this team, and I think this team is a little better. If for no other reason than the fact that they'll actually be able to shoot three-pointers. Well, LeBron and Kyrie coexisted, and they both had to have the ball. Yeah, but they were very much hero ball, take one after the other, and the East was fairly weak for a chunk of that run that they had. You had the 1 year where they came back on the Warriors because the Warriors ran out of gas between winning 73 games, between coming back from a 3-1 deficit against the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals, and then they went up 3-1, and then they just kind of took their foot off the gas. You also had the Draymond Green suspension for like his 4th time in the playoffs, kicking a dude in the dick, so that was cool. And that all just made for a recipe for LeBron and Kyrie to play 2-man hero ball and just kind of bring it all back. So, it is what it is. Could they have worked together, Dennis and Luka? Perhaps, but I don't think it would have been the ideal recipe. Kind of like Dirk and Nash. Now, their games played off each other better, but they were better when they separated than they were together. And I say that lovingly. That's 2 of my favorite Mavericks there. Obviously, Dirk, number 1. But Nash is one of my most beloved Mavericks in history as well. We still need another center. Dwight Howard is a decent pickup if he stays healthy. I have no interest in Dwight Howard at all. Talk about black hole on offense and everything. I'm just not interested. Yeah, he can give you a little bit of rebounding and shot blocking, but as you mentioned, health has been an issue for him. And there's a reason he's had like 4 teams in 5 years. Teams don't like him. He's not good for locker rooms at this stage. And I know we're not talking about a big price tag anymore, but this team, they've got a lot of front court players right now. It's just a matter of how they play and who they play, how many minutes, whatever. Mavs have such bad lottery luck. They do. How do you only get 3 assists when you play with Steph, Clay, and Draymond? I don't know. And again, someone can fact check and look up his actual career high in assists. That was a slight exaggeration, but I don't think it's that far off. And maybe it's 4. I don't know. Well, the Mavericks put Barnes in that position to be the guy. You just can't turn it off when you get another talent like Luka. They did put him in position to do that, but you can also look at his stats and see that every year he was here, he kind of declined. It was more shots per game and a lessened return on investment, so to speak, in terms of his points per game. And his percentages, they held okay, but they were never great. Basically, the development you looked for in his game wasn't there. 3 years with us, it was not there. And so it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to give him a new deal or to keep him, especially not at his like $24 million he's getting this year from Sacramento. Actually, you know what? No, he opted out and then got a new like $90 million deal from Sacramento, which is bonkers, man. Harrison Barnes should buy his agent a freaking yacht or something with all of his career earnings, because he's gotten him two $90 million deals that I, for the life of me, can't understand. It should be no question, this says Isaiah Hunt, it should be no question if the team is better. You just count adding KP. If he's healthy, way better. LOL, plus a great three-point shooter in Seth and a defender in DeLon. Yeah, again, I think this team is better than last year's. I don't think that it's a drastically better team like we were kind of hopeful of when we were looking at, approaching free agency, but I do think it's a better team. And by the end of this year, so in my comparison, I should point out, I talked about opening night last year versus opening night this year. I think this new team is better, but by the time you get to the end of the season, this team is going to be way better because you'll have that continuity, you'll have that chemistry on the court with each other. Luka, KP, DeLon Wright will do his thing. I think they'll be good. Hashtag kick the dude in the dick. Kick a dude in the dick. There you go. I'd rather have Harry Giles from the Kings instead of JJ. Barea? Yeah, they were always going to bring Barea back. I said that at the time. I said they'd give Barea not a vet minimum, but basically take whatever extra little dollar value earnings they could and just kick it to him that way. And that's pretty much what happened. Of course, they wasted like $14 million in cap space they had available. Mav Zero, what's good? Haven't seen you in a while. DeLon's a solid defender and a good finisher with size. I'm glad we have him. Agreed. Salute. Luka has to shoot threes better this year. Luka was actually shooting 38% last year prior to the trade deadline. And again, you took away 4 of his starters at that point. Suddenly, instead of having Wes Matthews, who was serviceable from 3, Harrison Barnes, who was serviceable from 3, they were both right around 34%. You instead had Dodo to kick out to, and there was no Barea anymore, who worked well with Luka when they were on the court together early in the year. You had Dodo and you had Dwight Powell and you had Maxey. You just didn't have the same caliber of guys out there for Luka to work with, and so it put more strain on him. You saw the exhaustion kind of set in, and that's why his percentages, both in terms of three-point percentage and in terms of field goal percentage, drop off. But he was shooting 38% around the midpoint of the year, and it was the trade deadline when his workload drastically shifted that you saw those percentages drop. What he really needs to work on, though, is free throws. That was a weakness of his all year, and it got worse as the season wore on. Is there a guy who can shoot with Luka 3 points or even better than Luka? A guy who can shoot threes as well as Luka or better? Curry. They got him. Why didn't they try more that German guy? Are you talking about Maxi Kleber? Maxi Kleber's he's an okay 3-point shooter. It's not really his game, but he can knock down corner threes for sure. DeLon is a good shooter, just not great, right? Because everybody keeps saying he's a bad shooter, like he's Rondo levels. He's just good, right? He's definitely not Rondo levels bad. He's not a great shooter if you look at his percentages. He did have 1 year, I think, where he shot like 34, 35%. But he's not a great 3-point shooter. A lot of that's just because he doesn't get the consistent minutes or attempts in that regard. He was playing obviously behind Kyle Lowry in Toronto, and then he went to Memphis last year, late in the year. Marc Gasol trade. He went to Memphis, and then he was behind Mike Conley, and it was only very late in that year when you saw him break out a little bit. He gets the 2 back-to-back triple-doubles against the Mavericks, back-to-back nights. And hey, I think he's like second all-time in Grizzlies history for triple-doubles. Who knew? Let's see here. So as far as his shooting, I think he's better than people give him credit for, but I still don't consider him a great shooter. That's something he'll have to develop. And at 27, he can do it. I mean, Jason Kidd added a 3-point shot to his game when he was like 33, 34 years old. But he's got a ways, I think, to go in terms of being a consistent 3-point shooter. Although he'll get the looks. Mavericks generate the third most open looks last year among teams in the NBA. And that's, again, Luka. Luka's vision and passing ability. DJ Bricks, what's up? JJ was Justin Jackson. Oh, Justin Jackson's who you were talking about. Yeah. I like Justin Jackson, though. I like him a lot. And the Mavericks liked him a lot when he was coming out of the draft from the year before Dennis Smith's class. It wasn't before Dennis Smith's class. It was the same year, right? Justin Jackson was like the very edge of the lottery. And Dennis was the ninth pick for the Mavericks. Let's see. The Mavs CEO will not allow Dwight Howard to be signed because our team is hetero. All right. Interesting stance. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. We had too many little men. DeLon Wright's a good pickup for the backcourt. Farewell, D. Harris. Still love you, bro. Yeah, Devin Harris is a long tenured Maverick between his now 3 stints with us, but I like Devin Harris for sure, but there's no place for him on the roster at this point. You got to get younger, you got to get better, and adding, as someone else pointed out, a tall backcourt player and a point guard, a 6'5" point guard who's a good defender, a versatile defender, can slash and finish at the rim well, and if he can improve his 3-point shot, I think you'll have a serviceable, very cheap point guard, which is nice. Where does Donnie Nelson rank? President of Basketball Operations, GM. I feel he isn't top 10 because you have guys like Masai, R.C. Buford, Ainge, Conley, Bob Myers, and doing a phenomenal job. Can Donnie Nelson get back? Man, I've never power ranked the GMs around the league. All I would say is that everybody has their misses. Obviously, there's been times where Danny Ainge has made mistakes, not being more aggressive going and getting Paul George. At the time when they were trying to get him from Indiana was a big one. He had a ton of number 1 picks, and he just didn't want to do it. So OKC swooped in and got him for a surprisingly cheap deal, although Victor Oladipo has turned into a very nice player. I also like Domantas Sabonis quite a bit. I think he's going to be a real 6th Man of the Year candidate for the next few years in Indiana. But there's things like that you just got to consider. Ainge has had his mistakes. You look at the Kyrie Irving situation, Horford leaving when he did. Boston's got a lot of question marks around him. So while he did build a very talented team, there's also been a lot that hasn't worked out for them. Where I would power rank Donnie, top 10, I don't think he's top 10. I think he's around that category. I think he's probably in the 15 range, I guess. But I don't know. I'd have to really sit and look. You look at where we've been the last few years, and of course you want to be like, what has he really done the last few years, you know? But and in the calendar span of a year, he added Luka Doncic, traded up for him, got him when almost nobody was talking about him. And it was clear that he was hyped on Luka even at the start of Dennis Smith's rookie year, the year before. He was very interested in that, quote, Slovenian kid. And so he had his eye on Luka the whole time and knew to go get him, even though obviously 3 other teams didn't consider Luka worthy at that pick. And you had dum-dums like, oh man, what's his name? He's so insignificant, I've just forgotten his name. I can't remember. He's some dum-dum that calls himself a draft guru, and he talked about it. He wouldn't touch Luka with a 10-foot pole, wouldn't even look at him until the 2nd round. Bitch, please. How'd that work for you? But Donnie saw that in Luka, and then he swung the deal to get KP. And when you look up what he gave up for KP, he really only gave up Dennis Smith Jr. because the other guys weren't coming back next year anyway. That's pretty good. It's pretty good. So he's had, free agency didn't work out like they wanted. Cuban's got to have some blame of that as well. But I look at that and I say Donnie's had, all things considered, a nice past year. Swing through here a little faster now. What-a-da-ba-ba. DeLon and Jalen are in good hands with the Dallas's development team. Yeah, I think so. Boban might be better than Mejri, but slow as molasses. Yes, he is. That's the thing for Boban. Anyone who thought Boban was going to be our starting center or that he was going to be like a guaranteed play every night even, he's not. He's never been an every night player in his career. He is, he's 7'2", 7'3", like KP, 7'3" then. But he doesn't have KP's mobility at all, not even close. Now he's crafty, he can score, and obviously his size makes him dominant and around the basket, but defensively, oof. And in terms of getting up and down the court, oof. So I think you'll see Boban at times, but there's a reason we got him on like a 2-year, $9 million deal or whatever it was. It was something quite respectable like that. Yeah, there's a reason he didn't fetch more. Who will be the 15th man on the roster? Roby, remaining free agent, someone trade, other. Hello from Slovenia. What's up, Frank? Let's see. Who do I think will be the 15th man? I think it's probably going to go to Roby. I think so. Because when we had the conversation about who might get that last spot previously on a previous show, Daryl Macon was still on the team, and that was one of those guys still kind of at the edge of consideration. I said I thought Reeves would probably be in that two-way contract category. I'm glad Cleveland got one as well, a two-way contract. I think probably Roby is going to be that, but really he needs time with the Legends. But I think that they do like a lot of... He's raw, but I do think they like a lot of what they think he could be. I think they look at him like he could be a Swiss Army knife. Not dominant in any way, but just a guy who can kind of, in the reserve role, fill out a stat line for you if he can just, A, get a little bit more comfortable at this level and at this speed, and B, he needs to improve his outside shot a little bit. But he's a guy who came into Nebraska as a point guard, hit a growth spurt in college super late, and then was playing like minutes at center by the end in some situations. So he played everywhere, and that gives him a diverse skill set and allows him to defend several different positions as well. Dolan doesn't have to be a great shooter in my opinion, though, just good, like around 30%. 30% is not a good three-point shooter, just for the record. That is a very subpar three-point shooter. Today's NBA, if you're below 34%, people start to look at you like you're just you're an adequate three-point shooter, not a good three-point shooter. But I get what you're saying. Luka, Seth, KP all can shoot. Hopefully Dwight stays around 30% consistently as well. I agree, Mav Zero. Still need more / better spot up three-point shooters, in my opinion. I agree. I want us to add another three-point shooter, and that's why they were still trying to get Danny Green. That didn't work out, obviously, but that would have been a fantastic ad. That's why they looked at Patrick Beverley as a starting point guard as well. But if you look at DeLon Wright's per 36 numbers, he actually ranks out better than Pat Bev as well, and he's a much better contract. It's not a $45 million contract over 3 years, I think is what Pat Bev got. Or was it $40 million? I can't recall. He came out to like $13 million a year. We got DeLon Wright for a cheaper deal than that. DeLon Wright signed like a 3-year, $27 million, I want to say. So they got him for, $9 million a year instead. People sleep on the Mavs for real. Yes, they do. Donnie Nelson. Oh, Don Nelson. Donnie's father back. Can we get him to come back to the Mavericks? I think he's too happy smoking weed in Hawaii, honestly. Don Nelson is all out of F's to give. And while Nelly was revolutionary in the NBA, he was like the mad scientist head coach. I don't think he would work for us in this regard. In this era, his style of play, which is now commonplace, is no longer unique and keeps you off balance. Now it's kind of the run-of-the-mill thing where everyone's used to it. And yet there are teams that can actually coach defense while playing his offensive style, something he never really could do as a head coach. So it is what it is. But I look at it and say that I love Don Nelson as a head coach, but I think he's quite content now, smoking a lot of pot in Hawaii. His words, not mine. Is the team full right now? We got one current roster spot open. I kind of would like Salah back. I think Salah's already on the roster as a 15th man, or maybe Zaza. I don't want Zaza. Vince Carter would be a nice bring back, but I don't know what role there would really be for him. He'd be like the elder statesman who only plays spotty minutes here and there, but he'd be a good veteran leader to add for sure. And then it'd be the Mavericks having another long tenured send-off. He's going year 22 of his NBA career, a longer career than Dirk. But while Dirk was with one team, Vince Carter has bounced all around the league. Toronto, New Jersey, Orlando, Phoenix, Dallas. Obviously the Hawks, but there was someone else after Dallas. Sacramento. I don't know. If there's another Vince Carter team, let me know, but I'm up to 7. I saw someone mention Brokoff. Brokoff is under contract, but he might, I think, get moved. Oh, here you go. I was talking about Ryan Brokoff, about the German guy. He's Australian. Yeah. How is Barea's leg? Barea's Achilles is on the mend. He was hopeful initially to play this month in the, I think, for the Puerto Rican national team, but he ended up making the decision, and I think it's a wise one not to do that because he wanted to be ready for the NBA season, wanted to make sure he gave himself the full time to heal. He's 34 years old coming off a torn Achilles. It's not a good track record, especially when you're a smaller guy whose shiftiness and quickness has built your career to this point. So I think this is going to be Barea's probably last season in the NBA, as my gut instinct. Still rumors about trading for a higher tier players such as Steven Adams and Blake Griffin, but with the franchise centerpiece Doncic and KP being so young still, is it too early to go all in? I don't see a move like that getting done right now. I think Oklahoma City, now that they're stuck with Chris Paul, they couldn't move his deal. I think now they're kind of looking at it and thinking that they're probably going to try and make a run at the playoffs, which, you know, they've got like 17 first-round picks between dealing Westbrook and Paul George, and that's not that much of an exaggeration, by the way. So that is what it is. Thunder could freaking trade 10 first-rounders to add a superstar next offseason and still have like 7 picks in the next few drafts. It's absurd. But I digress. I don't know that Steven Adams will be available. If he is, he's got big money he's owed the next 3 years, like $25 million, $27 million, $28 million, I want to say. And I love Steven Adams to death. I just have questions about how he would fit alongside KP. But would I love to see Steven Adams in a Maverick uniform? Oh, hell yeah. Who was the other guy I mentioned in there? Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin, man, Blake Griffin's an OU guy, so I have personal history there. I think he was the grade ahead of me, but yeah, I was in Norman same time as Blake Griffin and crossed paths a couple times when he was still at OU. And I don't know. His career has been so marred with injuries. I just have a hard time. He had a phenomenal year last year, and he's done a lot to earn some respect back from me the last couple years that he's played. But I just have a hard time giving that kind of money to a guy I can't trust to stay healthy to save his life. Do you think we'll be better than Sacramento? Sacramento was on the cusp of playoffs last year. They fell off late. I like a lot some of their young pieces. That'll be a toss-up. I think we can be better, but it's going to rely more heavily on the Luka KP dynamic carrying the Mavericks to be the better team in that regard. Because I think in terms of top to bottom depth, I think I might like Sacramento a hair more, but it is what it is. I think in terms of a playoff race, I think they're who we're in the thick of the race against. You know, also you'll have the Spurs to consider. What's another one? I ranked this out the other day where I thought the West playoff race looked like right now. I don't have it in front of me, but I have us competing for the 8 seed, but I think we're going to be somewhere in that 8 to 10 range. And I don't know. I don't know if they get over the hump and get to that point. You got to obviously unseat a team like San Antonio to do it, but we'll see. Robbie could still probably replace either Reeves or Cleveland as a two-way, and the Mavs might sign someone like VC, I guess. They could. I think Roby makes a lot of sense as a two-way contract, but we'll see. We should have kept Spalding, but I think Spalding is also quite raw, and I just think they lost all sense of patience with young guys that need a lot of time to develop. Roby's different because he acquired him with the 45th pick. Obviously, a guy like Reeves, he's going to have his work cut out for him, even though he was a standout in Summer League just because he's undrafted. So you're going to have to see. The team will not have a lot of patience. Dennis Smith Jr. was an example of limited patience. Once Luka broke out and showed that window before we compete again, once we stopped looking at it and saying, hey, 3 to 4 years from now, we could be back in real contention if we build smart. When Luka came in and broke out, it was suddenly like, oh, damn, we might be like 2 years out. Can we really afford to wait on Dennis Smith, or should we package him when he still has high value as part of a blockbuster deal? Oh shit, look at that. We can get KP. Done. That was pretty much how that worked out. But yeah, they've shown across the board on other fronts too. They're not going to hang on to a guy as a long-term project unless they really see something. They didn't hang on to Kostas. Fair. They were right to not hang on to him, I think. They didn't hang on to Daryl Macon, who was impressive last year in the with the Legends. But you just got to look at it. You got to figure out where you think this team is and what the window is. And you're going to churn the roster top to bottom and all of your prospects. I'm going to jump down in the comments a little bit. Sorry if I missed. You guys got to tag at the Dallas Prospect. It'll highlight it orange for me just so you know. That'll make sure I don't miss your question, but I want to make sure I'm not too far behind in the wheel here. Let's see. Oh, we got 81 people in the house, says Gle.
Vindication.
There we go. Vindication. Let's see here. I hope we can challenge the Spurs, says Abraham Young. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How much do you think Adams is worth? Other starting defensive caliber centers we can trade for. How much do I think Adams is worth? I would put him probably in the 20 to 24 range. 20 to 24 a year. That's still a very healthy contract for him. He's a guy that can give you a double-double. He's a great hustle player, great hard-nosed defender, does all the dirty work you want, great screen setter, creates a lot of space for your ball handler. A guy like Luka would love having him on there. A guy like Seth Curry would love having him on there. His problem is his horizontal foot speed, aka guarding in the pick and roll. Little suspect, obviously. Not especially fast. Not a great rim protector. He can get block shots, but he's never been an elite level shot blocker like Serge Ibaka was back in the day for the Thunder. Obviously, he just won a title with the Raptors. But yeah, I think somewhere in that 20 to 24 range. The problem is he's 25 this year, both 25 years old, which is crazy young, just especially with how much experience he has. 25 years old, but also making $25 million this year, and then I think it's like 27 and 28 to close out that max deal the Thunder gave him. Maxey hit 35% from three, was one of our best long-range shooting guys, if not one of the best on the team. If he actually played meaningful minutes. Yeah, Maxey's got the ability for it. The problem is I think Maxey overall doesn't make sense as a starting player for us. And coming off the bench and in some of those situations, he wasn't impacting the game as overall as much as you would like. But I like Maxey a lot. I'm glad they brought him back. It says a lot about our team when we are one of the most trigger-happy three-point teams in the league. I think it's just kind of the direction the game is going, and I think we've recognized that. And so Luka can find guys and create those looks for guys. As long as you understand spacing, Luka's going to find you, and he's going to give you a lot of great opportunities. I saw some crazy stat that Luka had on average like 6 open look three-point attempts per game that he created for teammates that they missed. Not just 6 open three-point looks he created a game. 6 that they missed. That's not including the ones they made. So Luka, in a perfect ideal world, could add as many as 6 assists to his average just by them converting that, and that would put him at 12 assists per game, and that's crazy. But I don't think he's going to be that. I mean, that's too ideal of a situation, but he'll have an opportunity to create more looks because of the gravity of a guy like Kristaps Porzingis and a guy like Seth Curry. But also, year 2, I think he'll see some of these passing lanes better, and I think he'll be better at creating the looks for the guys and knowing how to zip the ball to them. There were times last year he was a little unsure of himself on a couple pass attempts, and I think he's gotten a better feel for that now. Barry Grogan, what's up? Who will be the unknown breakout player for the Mavericks this season? I think Dorian Finney-Smith could be close. Finney could have a run. I am actually very partial to Justin Jackson. I know we mentioned him earlier. I'm favorable to him. I don't consider Seth a breakout candidate because, I mean, he could. His 1 year with us previous, I know he was with us 2 years, but he only played in the first year he was with us, was the best year of his career. He averaged over 12 points a game. I think he started something like 49 games, and when he became a starter, he was lethal. If you look at him just as a starter for us in that year, his numbers are eye-popping. The thing is, I don't think he fits in this lineup for us as a starter. I think he is a better kind of six-man guy off the bench who can just sharp shoot and shoot the lights out. He's like a career 42, 43% three-point shooter, shot 45% last year. I think the worst three-point shooting year of his career was like 41%, which is absurd because he gets like at least 4 looks a game. And when he was here, he was getting like 6 looks a game. Our lack of patience developing players is our biggest weakness. Look at how the Raptors did versus us. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but the Raptors are a very rare breed in today's NBA, and that's why people wanted to draw comparisons to that Raptors team to our 2011 Mavericks, because while we didn't draft and develop a lot of those guys, we were a team built through trades and free agent signings. We did have a lot of continuity on that roster. That's something we have not had much of in recent years, and I think that's part of why they looked at this summer and said, yeah, we want to add like a Danny Green if we can, or a Pat Bev if we can. We want to add these big names if we can, but we want continuity above all. We want to keep our core of guys. That's why we got like 9 guys now under contract for at least the next 3 years together. That doesn't mean they're all going to stay the next 3 years. Trades get done. Some of them will get moved. But at the same time, that's a lot of continuity, and we did not have that post-title. That championship team had all the major components of that championship team, other than like Peja, who came in like December or January of that year. Pretty much all of them had been there at least 2 years with the team. So that is why that team had such chemistry and such continuity within itself. So would I like it better if we drafted better and did all that? Hell yes, I would. But here's the thing. Mark Cuban's tenure has never had that. Never. Never, ever, 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 ever. Dirk is pre-Mark Cuban. Josh Howard was a first-round pick that was an all-star for us and was quality for us for several years. We moved him as part of the trade from to the Wizards to get Brendan Haywood, Caron Butler, and Deshaun Stevenson. That trade built a champion for us. Even though Butler couldn't play, and even though Haywood was a backup, Deshaun Stevenson was an integral part of that title run. I know people say, well, hey, it was when Barea got put in the starting lineup over Deshaun Stevenson that we turned the series. We won 3 straight at that point. We did, but Deshaun Stevenson was still great for us in that series when he played. Even when he wasn't a starter anymore, he was still making serious plays for us. And he was good in the playoff run in general. So right kind of crazy, right kind of guy to add into that personality team. But you look at things like that. Marquise Daniels was an undrafted free agent. Devin Harris was a first-round trade. He was what we sent Anton Jameson to the Wizards as well. And we got the rights to Devin Harris. He became an all-star with the Nets when we traded him for Jason Kidd, so that helped build a champion. Who was another first-round pick that we took that actually panned out? Because for years, there was nothing in that regard. First-rounders, for sure. We were trading back because we wanted to save money to keep a max slot open, and that's how you pass on guys like Giannis. That's how when you did draft, you drafted Kelly Olynyk only to flip him for frickin' Shane Larkin. So that all happens that way. But the Mavericks have never, under Mark Cuban, been a good drafting team. They just haven't been. They don't value the draft as they should. They made a concerted effort the last 2 or 3 years. Dennis Smith Jr. was a steal to fall into their lap, and that's nice. You flip him for Porzingis, and suddenly I'm looking at that saying, damn, okay. Yeah, Dennis Smith might not have been allowed to become in Dallas what you hoped he could be, but you got KP. That's a hell of an upgrade. Luka Doncic, I think they did excellent work, but it's an international player, and that's one aspect they have typically done pretty well in. Obviously Dirk, and then Luka. And then Roby this year, for where they picked, that one could pan out, but I think that one's going to be a long shot. But they got 2 picks in the trade down, 2 second-round picks. And then what did they trade to Memphis to get DeLon Wright, their starting point guard? 2 second-round picks. So Isaiah Roby, for trading down from 37 to 45, you gained 2 picks, which became DeLon Wright, your new starting point guard, and I think, quality point guard, not a big name or a flashy name by any means. And a project in Roby, who you think can be a stat filler for you. So, pretty savvy. KP move was unexpected. No rumors anywhere. It just happened out of nowhere. One thing I'll say on that, Quasimodo, I do want to give a shout out to, and you don't hear me do this a whole lot, but I want to give a shout out to Jake Kemp from I almost said 105. That's totally wrong. Now I look like a tool. From 1310 The Ticket. He, on air about a week before it happened, he was the only person I heard talk about the potential and why a KP to Dallas trade made sense. And that, yeah, because of the injury, it's a question mark, but he made the argument for it. And I listened to the segment, and I kind of remember thinking, like, whatever, dude, that's so pie in the sky. There's no way. And even if we did, yeah, I don't know about the knee. Especially then. I wasn't paying attention to the Knicks. All I knew was KP was out. So I just kind of disregarded it. But damn sure came true. Damn sure came true. So suddenly I look at it, and now anytime someone's like, yeah, it was nowhere, most part, yes, it was nowhere. But Jake Kemp was the only person I heard breathe a word of it, and then it played out almost exactly as he said, which was kind of shocking. I think he might have, in his pitch, had Harrison Barnes in there as well instead of Wes or something like that. I can't remember the exact details. I remember there was like one player that was off in his projection, but shout out to him for that. That was impressive. So let's see. DeLon reminds me of Rondo. He plays defense and can pass his ass off. Yeah, he can guard multiple positions. He's bigger and longer than Rondo as well. And he can finish around the rim, which is a huge element. If he can add a three-point shot to his game, he'll get plenty of open spot-up looks. But if he can add that to his game, he can be quite quality for us as a cheap point guard. Let's see. Steven Adams would be Tyson Chandler 2.0. I think Steven Adams would have the potential of being... Now, he's not the enforcer, and he's not the enforcer personality, and he's not the vocal leader that Tyson was, but he's a great locker room guy and very, very, very much loved by the team and media there in Oklahoma City. Always great for a quote, too. Not that matters. I mean, I guess to media guys it does. But, yeah, nothing bad to say about Steven Adams other than... I think next to KP, his foot speed and his perimeter defense could be troublesome for us in that lineup. You should check Kelman Problik. Main reason Slovenia won against Serbia in the European finals. He's a sharp shooter from three and good at slashing. All right, I'll have to look into him. Rough Reven, what's good? We all remember that something like 4 years from now, Luka will be a guy that will average 27, 8, and 8. Mark my words, says DJ Bricks. Dude, I'd be thrilled if that's the case. I wrote an article pretty recently for Dallas Sports Fanatic, if you want to check that out. I think I linked it in a community post as well. But I talked about kind of projecting Luka in year two, and I talked about the two-man game that he can form with Porzingis, how they complement each other, and how that can bump some of his averages. I kind of went down his stat line and talked about where he could grow. But here's context for people who may not realize this. Luka led the Mavericks last year in points at 21.2, rebounds at 7.8, because of the DeAndre Jordan trade. By season's end, he was the leader. DeAndre Jordan obviously was averaging like 14, 15 boards a game prior. Assists at 6, steals at 1.1, and you had to go to blocks before you got someone else, and that was Maxi at 1.1, Maxi Kleba. So a lot of value there. DeAndre Jordan, before he got traded, was averaging 13.7 boards a game and 11 points. So something there to consider. When we were talking earlier about the Mavericks, what their ideal scenario could look like, the offense averaged, what was it? I had a note of it here somewhere. The offense scored 108.9 points per game last year, gave up about 110. Defensively, I think they'll be better. I think their starting lineup will have enough length and athleticism that they should be able to do a little something in that regard. KP was averaging 2.7 blocks per game prior to his injury, and he made the All-Star team in the East that year, but he didn't get to play obviously because of the injury. But he still got the honor for it. So yeah, there's a lot of value there. He was 22.7, 2.7 blocks, and like 6.7 boards. That's the one area of his game I hope he builds on. But I think the Mavericks are probably realistically looking at something in that territory, where I think that they can be 40 to 44 wins. But we just have to see. Let me see here. I want to jump on some of the comments too in that community post I mentioned earlier, just because I want to hit on a couple of these topics. Let's see here. Gabriel Paulin asked who would be the better starter, Justin Jackson or Dorian Finney-Smith. Should either be given the role as a starter. Dodo has more history here with us. He's been a project we've actually worked on the last 2 or 3 years. I think he'll get first crack with the team, but I think Jackson has probably a higher ceiling. I don't think Dodo is a guy that would work as an everyday starter for you. I think he gets exposed a little bit, and we saw that after the deadline last year. Some of these guys that you had to ask to play starter minutes were guys that really needed to be role players, and that kind of hurt us in the back half of the year. So when people want to talk about how, oh, Luka's percentages dropped off, well, it was because of that. It was because he was having to do more. He was having to play more minutes. He averaged like 32 minutes a game for the year last year, did Luka. But post All-Star break, it was like 39, almost 40 minutes a game. And there were nights he had to play 44 of the 48 minutes just for the team to be within 6 in the final minutes. So it's just crazy things like that they have to figure out. I like Jackson better in that regard. Could the Mavs be the most underrated team in the NBA right now, asks Christian Kruger. Most underrated, I don't know about most, but they are certainly getting disrespected a lot. And I understand, by the time KP plays, it'll have been like 20 months since his injury. And so people have forgotten how good he is. People have forgotten how dynamic of a player and a scorer he is. And they, for some reason, man, Luka Doncic, and I posted about this too, Luka Doncic averaged, let me see here, 21, 7, and 6, a stat line that's only been matched or bettered by LeBron, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Russell Westbrook, Grant Hill, Kevin Garnett, James Harden, and Michael Jordan. 8 guys in NBA history. But did you notice the trend there? We're talking about Luka Doncic's rookie year compared to 8 other players, all of which probably will end up in the Hall of Fame. And in the case of all 8 of those players, we're not talking about their rookie years. We're talking about the best years in their career. And there are still people who act like Luka, like, oh, I don't know if he can play in the NBA level. I don't know if he can be a superstar caliber player. Really? Dude, you're missing it. You're missing the forest through the trees. You can't see the forest through the trees. You're off. I don't know how else to say it. Luka was rated by Bleacher Report as the NBA's top player under either 23 years old or under. But, it is what it is because they also had Zion Williamson, number 2. He hasn't played a minute. He played like 7 minutes of Summer League before getting hurt and sitting out the rest. They had Trae Young, for whatever it's worth, at 7th. So, Let's see here. What's another one of those topics? How many games should we ideally win? Again, I'm not in favor of tanking. I'm looking at it in terms of making a run for the playoffs because you gotta build some momentum and some energy behind your team moving forward if you want to ever get any quality free agents, even if we're just talking about solid shooters. Do you honestly think the Mavs can beat the Spurs for the playoffs? And if we don't make the playoffs this year, was it a failure? Asks Pedro Romero. Let's see. Do I think we can beat the Spurs for the final playoff spot? It'll be tough, but I think it's capable. I mean, I know people have been predicting, myself included, the demise of the Spurs for the past few years, and it just has not happened. I thought when Kawhi Leonard and them went south a couple of years ago that was finally the drop-off, but they've not missed a beat. Popovich is an amazing coach. DeMar DeRozan has continued to play great. He's not really the style of today's NBA player. He shoots way more mid-range jump shots than any other player in the league at this point. And Aldridge has still been solid, but he's slipping. So I kind of view it in this sense. I view it as I think the Mavericks can. And the Spurs went balls out trying to get KP from the Knicks. In fact, the Knicks actually have accused the Spurs of, what's the word I'm looking for? Tampering with Kristaps Porzingis. The Spurs really wanted KP from the Knicks, so they must be pissed that he ended up in Dallas. And if that's the case, then I tend to think that he went from being the guy they hoped could help save them and keep them in relevancy, and now he's going to help destroy them. That's how I like to view it. So If they don't make the playoffs, if Dallas doesn't make the playoffs, was the season a failure? No, it's not a failure, because if you win, if you win more than I say, I mentioned last year 48 games got you the 8 seed. If you somehow win, let's say 46 games, and you miss out by 2 games on the 8 seed, well, you improved by 13 games over last year. And you showed KP and Luka can play off each other well. And I highly doubt Luka gets snubbed an All-Star vote again this year, or an All-Star nod this year. I don't know if KP gets in as well, but he'll at least, if he's healthy, be in the consideration, you got to think. So if you look at it in those categories, if you have 1 or 2 All-Stars, you win 13 more games, and now you have a year's worth of work to look at KP and Luka together, and now you can actually go out to free agents and see, it's not hypothetical anymore. Now you see how they can play together. Then you're having a different conversation. You're not saying, hey, Danny Green, you want to come to Dallas? We can pay you money, but hey, Luka, Rookie of the Year. That's what's up. Yeah, KP. Don't worry about the fact he hadn't played in like 20 months. It's fine. You saw what he was before, right? Yeah? You remember that? Yeah? You don't remember that super well? Well, hold on. Let me show you some clips. You see this? Yeah, that was pretty nice, right? It's just a different pitch meeting. So that's how I view it. I view it as it's not a failure. To me, the only way I view the season as a failure would be if they way underperform. And I'm going to say underperforming. To me, if you don't win 42 games, if you don't go 500 this year, then I think you may have underperformed. If you're 43 wins or more, I think you took at least a step forward, even if not the size step we want. I'm not in all or nothing phase yet. The Western Conference is stupidly stacked with superstar duo teams. And as young as we are, I'm still hopeful. I'm not in the mode of like, hey, I need to go win it now. I am in the mode of I want them in the playoffs so that Luka and KP can finally get playoff experience. Did KP ever make it with the Knicks? I don't think so. I think they added him after their last year in the playoffs. Yeah, if that's the case, that's even something more to want that for. You want to get that experience for them so that they're ready for it the next time around when we are ready to put a team together to go for a deep playoff run. Let's see here. I'm going to take a couple more questions. I've been going a little over an hour here. Let's see. I saw someone tag prospect. Oh, I already got that one. We got the great Bobby for those matchups. Nice. Even if we way underperform, we have our pick. I know it's not ideal, but it is there. After that, though, we have to perform because we can't give the Knicks good picks. I'm honestly indifferent towards it. Like, I know it became a competitive thing for, like, the Luka deal where you're like, oh, we don't want to say who won or lost the trade. We don't want to say that we lost the trade potentially, which we didn't. Trey, even if he's 3/4 as good as Luka, which maybe that's a decent place to put him. Even if he's that, people are like, well, they got another player for him. Yeah, it ended up being the 10th pick. It's not even RJ Barrett. It's which one is it? Which Duke guy is it? Cam Reddish? I think it's Cam Reddish. I don't consider them combined Luka, but even still, cool. You got your guy. We got our foundational guy too. So I don't view it as a loss. The Knicks, my God, the Knicks botched everything. They screwed up free agency royally. They only traded KP because they were trying to keep the max salary slot open. So they lost everything. Even if they wound up with a good pick, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. Like, I don't care who they add. If we're talking more than a year from now, like, because we can't give up our pick next year, as you already pointed out. If we're talking 2 years from now, who they're going to get, dude, if we're in the lottery 2 years from now, something has gone horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. Let alone if we're in the lottery to the point of being like a top 5 pick. Who do you think the Mavs sign in 2020? Maybe Gordon Hayward. Oh, man. I don't know that Hayward has a whole lot left. I haven't seen a whole lot from him after that gruesome injury. So I'd be interested in what the money is. If he wants to play a certain role that fits us, then sure. First lineup, second lineup ideas. First lineup, as I already mentioned, you're going to have DeLon Wright, Luka Doncic. Then you're either going to have Dodo or Justin Jackson. Then you're going to have KP and Dwight Powell. That's going to be your starting lineup as it is currently constructed today. That's what Cuban alluded to. That's what the plan is. Your second lineup, you're going to have Curry in there. I think Curry's going to be your shooting guard for that second unit. You're going to have Maxey. I don't think Brea is your second unit. You'll have Brunson, Curry, the opposite of whoever's left from the Powell Dodo conversation, not Powell Dodo, Justin Jackson Dodo conversation at your 3. Your 4, then you're going to have probably Maxey, and then somewhere in that you're going to have a combination of Boban or Sala, probably. What kind of exceptions will we have available for next year? I know we have no space at all, but we should have some sort of exception. We have a trade exception currently. We could end up letting it die if not used by the deadline, but it is another like $14 million in cap space that we have. I didn't even mention like Courtney Lee when I was talking about that second unit, by the way. I forget he's still here. He'll probably be an expiring contract they try and move at the deadline, if not sooner. But they got that trade exception from the Harrison Barnes deal right before the deadline last year. Obviously, the Jackson for Harrison Barnes, their salaries didn't match up, so it created about a $14 million trade exception. We still have that. That'll create some flexibility for us, and they'll have some cap space next year. I don't know if it's mega bucks, but I think they can pair something together at the deadline to acquire not necessarily a superstar, but a very nice fit along Luka and KP. And if they're able to do that, and if they're able to hover around in the thick of that playoff race and then add a significant part around the deadline, I think that they can make the playoffs. If they don't make that move and they're basically the opening night roster by the end of season, then I think it could get a little more sketchy. Where do you see Tim Hardaway Jr.? That's a very good conversation as well for a guy talking about the second unit. Tim Hardaway Jr., he's here this year and next still. I think he's still got like freaking 2 years left in his deal. Courtney Lee, I know, is expiring after this season. But, yeah, Hardaway Jr. is going to be probably in that second unit as well. So that gets real sticky when you start talking about that, because it's really, your second unit's always more fluid. Your first unit, I mean, even that's fluid, but your first unit, your starters are pretty ironclad most of the time. You run them about 70% of the time, your same lineup. But once you get into the second unit, then it really just comes down to matchup or who's healthy or whatever, who's been on a hot streak. If Tim Hardaway Jr. is hot, he's a very good player. The problem is he's very hot and cold. Best point guard KP ever played with was Jarrett Jack. That is true. That is true. And that's why I think KP's set for a big year. I want Tim Hardaway Jr. gone. He'll be one of those guys that we could move at the deadline. I think he could be a decent bench player for us, but there's no doubt he's getting paid big bucks for a guy that's not really in our ideal plans or picture. Curry is fine as the 2 guard for the second unit. Brunson needs to run that second unit with free choices. He needs the ball. I agree, and I think Brunson is your starting point guard, or sorry, second point guard. But yeah. Anyway, I think it's going to wrap it up for this time, guys. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. I don't know how many are watching live. I think the view counter thing locked up. I guess I can refresh it to see. I heard someone earlier mention 80 or something like that. Let's see. Refresh it. What do we got? 83. How about that? So salute to everyone who watched. If you have Mavericks questions, feel free to hit me up with them. You can leave them in comments. I'll throw out these community posts every now and then like I did today, where it gives you a chance to get your questions in as well. If you want to make sure I see your question in the comments, tag at the Dallas Prospect. It will highlight it in orange for me. That way I make sure I don't miss your questions. Rafa right there with a perfect example. Do you think do I think Frankie N would be a good point guard for us? At this point, we don't need him. At this point, I mean, I was open to the idea of him as like a second round picks, sending like a second round pick or something like that, and a bit part before, but now it's not necessary to me. I don't think there's a need for him. 82 is right now. All right, salute. Well, appreciate everyone. I will be back. I'll try and be back later this week. I don't know if it'll be live or if it's just going to be another kind of segment I do where I just talk and then premiere the video. We'll figure it out. But hang tight. We got more content coming for you. And until next time, remember, every legend was once a prospect. Salute.
Vindication.